Good evening. A very warm welcome to Birkbeck, to the School of Business, Economics and Informatics, and to Business Week. Business Week is our showcase where we show the world the research we are doing in the school, and we bring in distinguished guests to contribute outside ideas to particular themes. We have our theme for Business Week this year is around the legacy of major sporting events. Clearly, you may have noticed that there is a football tournament going on at the moment. I don't know how England will do, but I'm sure we'll do well. So we've been exploring the economics, the politics, the business, and the legacy of such events. And each day has culminated in a keynote speech, and each of those speeches is a memorial lecture. And to introduce the memorial lecture and our speaker for tonight, I'm pleased to introduce the Master of Birkbeck, Professor David Latchman.
Thank you, Philip. It's a great pleasure to be here to introduce this lecture. It's also, of course, a pleasure tinged with sadness in that we're remembering the memory of Lord Marshal of Knightsbridge, Colin Marshall, who was the most fabulous chairman of Birkbeck between 2003 and 2010. And I speak as somebody who obviously had to interact very closely with him, and nobody knew how to be a chairman better than Colin. It's a great pleasure to welcome Lady Marshall and their daughter Anna Burkitt to the lecture tonight, in which we commemorate the enormous role that he played in Birkbeck, not least in the building that we now have in Stratford, in our Stratford campus. And of course, it's entirely appropriate that the theme of Business Week has been from London to Rio. Some of us listened last night to Neil Coleman talking about his Olympic experience, and tonight perhaps we're shifting the focus more into football. I think in terms of our interests and in terms of the theme of Business Week, and indeed in terms of Lord Marshall himself, I don't think there could be a more appropriate speaker for this evening than David Bernstein, somebody who has combined a highly successful business career outside the football sector with a series of chairmanships within the football sector, moving from Manchester City to Wembley to the Football Association. So it really is a great delight to invite David to deliver this year's Lord Marshall Memorial Lecture under his title, From Club to Country, a 20-year journey in football. David Bernstein.
Well, good evening, everybody, and whatever you may think of this evening's delivery, no biting the speaker, please. And may I just add to say how good it is, Lady Marshall, to have you here this evening. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak and to round off what I hope was a fascinating and educative day for all those of you who've been here all day. Being here is a bit like the Football Association, too much to do and say and not enough time to deliver, but I will do my best. I want to basically focus on governance issues, but also on my practical experience of being at the sharp end with Manchester City and the Football Association. I will just briefly touch on FIFA. Just first, a little background. I was born in St Helens in Lancashire and became a City fan very, very young in life. Quite why, I'm not sure, because my family were not into football, but I think the colour, the sky blue, the fact that they had a massive stadium, they had the record attendance for a club match in this country. But we moved south when I was very young, so it was sort of love from afar, sort of distance lending enchantment. I qualified as a chartered accountant in 1966 and joined a 10-partner firm and became a partner pretty young at the age of 25. Partly because I was regarded by a medium-sized firm as being a specialist in public company work. I had sort of some big firm experience very young. And I became a sort of lead partner dealing with our major clients, our public company clients. And in those days, you could sort of provide a wide range of services. It wasn't as specialist and divided as it is now. And it is relevant, my biggest client became the Pentland Group, who some of you may know. They were known as Liverpool Shoe Company originally, but they grew rapidly on the back of Reebok. They invested in Reebok when Reebok was in its infancy. And between 1972 and 1979, the capitalization of the company went from $500,000 to $750 million. There was a headmaster on the share register who bought £1,000 of shares and kept them and became a millionaire on that investment and retired to become an investment advisor. The group had a lot of cash arising from the sale of its Reebok investment, and my job basically was to strategize, find acquisitions. We bought all the Speedo companies, Berghaus, LS, brands that would be well known to you. And I had a great 7 years there. The company has now been privatized as one of the largest private companies in the company and controls JD Sports. But as part of my function there, in 1994, I was chasing a guy in the north for a major guarantee, personal guarantee. And he asked me if I wanted to meet Francis Lee, who may be known to many of you. Francis Lee was on the verge of taking over Manchester City, and had been a childhood hero of mine, the last really great city side from around about 1969-70. You can turn Francis Lee. And I gave him some advice, mainly financial advice, which by and large he pretty much ignored. He went through with the acquisition of the club, found himself undercapitalized very early on, and asked me if I'd join the board. I joined the board and found a complete vacuum there, vacuum of everything, vacuum of management, and things went from bad to worse. The fans were turning very nasty indeed, and this would really follow 20 years of underperformance. The club hadn't really done anything much since the mid-70s. In fact, if you remember Main Road, their ground was described as a theatre of comedy, as opposed to the Theatre of Dreams, which was somewhere else. Things went, as I say, from bad to worse, and I was asked by the shareholders and the directors, the board, to take over as chairman in March 1998, and a month, 6 weeks later, we were relegated to the third level of English football for the first time in the club's history. It was a very bad moment indeed. A couple of things I remember from that. There was a picture taken after our last match of a young lad, about a 12-year-old lad, crying his eyes out, who sort of became known as the crying fan. And we took a copy of that photo for the Manchester Evening News, framed and put it in the boardroom with a pledge that that boy would never have to cry again. And the other thing I did at the time, was the day after we went down, we did a 2-page spread in the Manchester Evening News with a recovery program, just to give the fans some belief that things could possibly get better, having gone from bad to worse. But of course, as often in life, failure provided an opportunity. There were no sacred cows, and we were able to do things that previously would have been impossible. So basically, in a very short time, 2 or 3 years, we moved the club from the 19th century, where it was in many ways, to the 21st century. The club's offices were a house in Moss Side. We created proper modern offices. They had a store about the size of that stage there. We created a proper store for them. We brought in real serious management, some very, very good people, who one of whom particularly is doing very well in football now. Very importantly, we opened a new training ground, because the existing training ground was also in Moss Side and was totally unsuitable for a major football club. And we opened one quite close to United's. And most importantly, we did the deal for the Commonwealth Games Stadium, where we managed to negotiate a fantastic deal with the Manchester City Council and Sport England, and for a fairly small amount of money, we ended up with a fabulous stadium, really based upon which the club's success, subsequent success has happened. So we managed to get 3 promotions in 4 years, the first one of which was finalised in a playoff at Wembley, one of the last matches at the old Wembley in 1999. Again, those of you who follow football may remember we beat Gillingham. We were 2 down with 1 minute to go in this match. 2 down, 1 minute to go in a match which was absolutely vital for the club's future, because had we not got through, I don't think the stadium would have happened. And being 2 down with a minute to go, we finished 2-2 and won on penalties. We then got promoted the following year, got relegated, brought Kevin Keegan in as a manager, and got promoted again. And in 2000, in the following year, 2002, we actually beat Manchester United for the first time in many, many years. I left in March 2003 on matters of principle, and the rest is history. They got into very bad ownership under a Thai owner, Thaksin Shinawatra, but have now got, I think, very good and very, very wealthy owners in the form of the Abu Dhabi people. So now they're now, to my amazement, the richest club in the world, league champions, and you know, all is rosy in the blue part of Manchester. So what did I learn about governance in football clubs? Honestly, not a huge amount. Taking aside a few public companies, the clubs rely on their investors, and their investors can range from nation states to local businessmen, and it attracts people with strong independent views. Most clubs do take their fans and their customers seriously, and that does provide a degree of oversight. But above all, it's all about success. Fans demand success. And as we'll see a little later, it is very difficult to focus people's minds on the dry issues of governance and so on. It's very difficult to hold people's attention. And without sounding cynical, I don't want to, but if you ask me what are the lessons from that, I would say money is king. If you've got it or if you haven't got it, either way, money plays, as you well know, an enormous role. And when money runs out, football is very unforgiving to people who may have backed clubs and done a huge amount. But when the money runs out, you know, they want change. If you get in these situations, be radical, move quickly, move early. And I think, as an aside, strong control by the leagues is needed in terms of fit and proper persons, in terms of who actually owns the clubs. After I left City, I was asked to come onto the Wembley board. Wembley was I hadn't started building Wembley yet. I didn't want to spend much time on the Wembley thing, just to say it was a great privilege to be on that board. It was a great group of people, and I think we've ended up with, we like to say, the best stadium in the world. I think it is. It's a magnificent stadium, and you know, is earning good profits, good money. It has its challenges, as you'd expect. But turning to the Football Association, 2010 had been a very difficult year for the FA. There'd been personnel changes, a total lack of stability and of confidence, a disastrous World Cup, and a disastrous World Cup bid. They'd lost their CEO in February 2010 and lost their chairman very suddenly in May 2010. And I was approached and appointed chairman in February 2011. So what did I find? Well, I found a complex, multifaceted organisation, something that's a governing body and a representative organisation. It owns Wembley and now owns the National Football Centre, and that's, I think I might say, about £900 million worth of assets. It runs 24 England teams. It governs the game. It is responsible for discipline within the game, and that's sometimes a very difficult balance to achieve in terms of running football. And it runs a national game, which is a huge base of football across the country. I think, I won't look at the figure, it looks too big, but I think it's right. There's 800,000 volunteers working under the aegis of the FA. It runs women's football, it runs disability football, it runs international football, of course, and it copes with the whole international side of football, along with 200 other countries within FIFA and UEFA. And it is under huge media scrutiny all the time. I would also add, and it's relevant to what I want to say later, but it has an excellent executive team. The team actually working there are dedicated, young, talented people. It's a first-class team of people. I had 2 aims and 5 themes when I got there. The aims were to try and re-establish some stability and some confidence. And the themes, I'll go through individually, but I want to focus on the last one. That's really the core of what I want to talk about. But the first of the 5 themes was football. Obviously, it is the Football Association, and football is core to what we do. And there's a lot of different sort of football facets. Club England, which is the part of the FA, which I chaired as well, which runs the England teams, is a fascinating thing to be part of. Hugely responsible. I think what we did in professionalising the Club England setup was a big improvement on where we'd been before. Club England appointed the England manager in Roy Hodgson. Football includes running St George's Park and the football part of St George's Park, which is a huge step forward. It's taken an awful long while to get there, but it is now a world-class centre for a number of things, but particularly for developing coaches. We have many too few good coaches, qualified coaches in this country. And also football development, i.e. the grassroots of football, which is also very challenging, particularly in this climate where there's a cutback in resources, and facilities are on the whole going downhill, and there are fewer people playing football across the country. So that in itself is a challenge, but it's a huge responsibility. Secondly, the second theme was efficiency, to try and ensure that the organisation was running efficiently, and I'm pleased to say I think it does, and particularly in terms of prioritising resources and organising and running Wembley, which is a massive thing in itself, and the National Football Centre efficiently. Thirdly was relationships. When I got there, relationships with the outside world were pretty fragmented. They weren't good with UEFA and FIFA. There were issues, I believe, with the government, certainly with the media. The lack of confidence at the FA had meant they were very nervous of the media, and we got onto the front foot with that. And with the other bodies in football, I can't say the relationships were too good. And we made a lot of progress. I mean, with UEFA, we managed to get 2 Champions League finals in 3 years at Wembley, which was a great coup. And with FIFA, in spite of my standing up at the FIFA Congress and speaking against the process for electing the president 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I managed to establish a proper relationship with Seb Blatter and the people there, because we need it. Whatever we may think of them, we reckon we need to stay within that tent, because if you're outside it, things can get very difficult. The fourth was respect, and respect covers a wide range of issues, including anti-discrimination, that whole area of anti-racism and so on. And I was asked by the Prime Minister to lead a report on behalf of the whole of football on the issues, to try and come up with recommendations to try and improve the situation with regard to discrimination and so on. And we managed to get the football to sign off on something. It's fairly unusual for the whole of football to do that. Within respect, you'd have the issues of referees, on-pitch issues of our being what we call good tourists. When we, for example, went to Poland and Ukraine for the Euros, we visited the Auschwitz extermination camp, which I believe did a lot of good in various ways. And there's been a move to try and get the England set up to be a little more open, a little less closed. It was very closed in South Africa, very much sort of on its own. And we tried to open the whole thing up and be what we describe as good tourists. I think we managed to do that. But the fifth and the thing I really want to focus on this evening, of the 5 themes, is governance. Now, the problems in 2010, including a World Cup failure, had put football under a huge spotlight. The government had got rather concerned, and Parliament had got concerned, and they appointed a parliamentary select committee to look into matters and report, which pretty much coincided with my appointment. In fact, I had to appear in front of this committee 2 months after I'd been appointed, which was not much fun, I have to tell you. Now, what I want to do, and I hope you'll bear with me, but I want to read 5 verbatim quotes from the Select Committee reports, because they're key to what I want to say. And these are not my words, these are the words of a parliamentary select committee. So, number 1, the Football Association is a national governing body of English football. It is the most appropriate agency to take the lead in addressing the weaknesses of English football, but it needs urgent reform to carry out its responsibilities effectively and meet the future challenges of the game. 2, the FA should review the composition of the FA Council to improve inclusivity and reduce average length of tenure. The reformed council should absorb the shareholder role. All FA committees should report to the board, not the council. 3, We also recommend that various changes be made to the governance structures of the Football Association, making it more representative and able to act as an effective governing body. 4. As the governing body of football in England, the Football Association should take the lead in decision-making for the game, but the National Game Board and the Professional Game Board, and I'll just stop there and say they are the two key committees within the FA, are dominated by the Premier League, which provides funding, directly or indirectly, to the national game and other leagues. And finally, the representative balance of the Football Association Board is an even more pressing issue than its size. However, in order to allow the Football Association to become a strategic body, able to assert itself over the leagues where appropriate, we recommend a board structure that puts Football Association executives and non-executives in the majority over the vested interests of the professional game and national game. I'm just going to read the key words again, because there's quite a lot of words there. Urgent reform to carry out its responsibilities effectively. Review the composition of the FA Council, among other things, to improve inclusivity. More representative and able to act as an effective governing body. Dominated by the Premier League, which provides funding directly or indirectly to the national game and to other leagues. And we recommend a board structure that basically makes the FA board more independent. Now, they're not my words, they are the words from a parliamentary select committee, but I have to say that I agree with them wholeheartedly. So where does that leave us now? Well, the problems of 2010, including the World Cup failure, as I say, had put football under a huge spotlight. Now, we've been knocked out of the World Cup again, back only 9 days, I think it is, after we went. That compounds 40 years of underperformance, almost consistent underperformance, with one or two very small exceptions. We've had different managers, different players, but the same results. Is there a connection between that performance and the governance issues? Of course there is. Football can't be the only business where the structure and setup of the whole organisation doesn't have an influence on the results or the bottom line in this sense. The problem is not team selection. It's not formations or whether we should be playing 4-4-2 or 3-5-1-1. It is systemic, and it has a long history. If you read Walter Winterbottom's biography, and those of you again who know football will know he's one of the great England coaches, writing around about the 1950s, when England, by the way, lost to the USA in the World Cup, you'll see the same sorts of issues, a little more extreme, I would accept, but things have changed in this respect much less than you might think. The FA is a governing body, but too little a governing body, and a representative body too much. It's out of balance. Let me put this into context. The Premier League has 3 to 4, I've lost track, but it's going up fast, 3 to 4 billion pounds of income, and is a fantastic product, and no one can dispute that. The FA's income is round about 300 million pounds, 1/10 of the Premier League. The Premier League exercises considerable influence over the game and over the FA, and it has strong representation on the FA board, which it knows how to use. The Premier League is a 21st century organisation. It's streamlined. It also lacks normal governance, by the way, as we perhaps saw with the Scudamore issue recently, but it is a very streamlined, very powerful organisation. The FA structure, and remember I'm talking about the structure, I'm not talking about the executive, the structure is mid-20th century. The FA Council is outmoded and sits below an obscure shareholder structure, which I never really fathomed out, even though I was there. The committee structure is complex and beggars belief. It drives, and I know this for a fact, the FA executive crazy in terms of its complexity and difficulty to work with. The FA needs a modern, independent structure to deliver and balance the power of the Premier League. There's always been a problem, but it's been magnified by the Premier League's success. I think nature abhors a vacuum, is a common saying, and I believe the Premier League has taken advantage of a vacuum arising from FA weakness. The whole structure needs remodelling. Now, I tried to make some change, and I achieved a marginal, really marginal success. I managed to get 2 independent directors onto the FA board. One of them, and I mention her name because I think she's done a great job, Heather Rabatz, has, by the way, the first woman to be an FA board member, has been an independent voice. I mean, she's spoken out on various issues, at least as someone who's spoken out independently. But the amount of work I had to do to achieve that, I had to tour the country, I had to go around talking to FA councillors and shareholders and heaven knows what on a countrywide tour just to achieve that amount of progress. So my thesis here, and it's quite clear, is this will not happen without outside intervention. The FA is not capable of self-reform. And without this, progress in the English game will be limited, and real substantial progress isn't possible. But interestingly, as things sort of, I won't say they improved, but they quietened down after 2010, over 2011, 2012, the government and Parliament and even the Select Committee all seemed to lose interest. It didn't, the headlines that had been there in 2010 sort of disappeared. Because why? Well, it's obvious why. Because the subject is too difficult and too technical to attract media attention or to maintain media attention. It needs a sustained focus. Am I sort of optimistic as to things will happen? No, I'm not optimistic. I thought we had a great opportunity with the problems of 2010, with the Select Committee, with my being potentially reformist, all these things coming together. So I can't quite see why I'm certainly not here to give you a solution. I'm just sort of outlining the problem. The only solution will come, I think, if enough pressure is exerted from the outside. But I can't see that being, if it happens, being sustained. Another Luis Suarez issue will happen, or something else which will attract public interest, and this will sort of go away again. But when we fail in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, as we have for the last 40, don't be surprised. I'd just like to touch briefly on FIFA. FIFA always very much in the news. In this country, of course, always bad news. But let me just say a little positive before we get to the obvious negative. FIFA holds 220 countries together, which is no small achievement. It does a great deal of good. It actually runs a very successful World Cup competition most of the time. But of course it's damaged by regular scandals, which again are a factor of poor structure. And I have to say that they're concerns that do concern us in this country, in our media, but they're not concerns shared by a large part of the FIFA constituency. Efforts are being made to reform, but the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Will Sepp Blatter get re-elected? Probably. Will Qatar hold the World Cup in the summer or the winter? Probably. Will reform happen? Well, it may do, but will it be real? Because, you know, FIFA are pretty good at sort of cosmeticizing. So will there be real reform? I don't know. So in summary, governance is an issue right across football, both nationally and internationally. My view is we will be better placed to take a stand with FIFA if we make a serious attempt to put our own house in order. We live in hope. Thank you very much.